Shirley here with Jupitalis, and this is Moon Hour Sol Day. And the moon is 12th house in Leo, and ascendant is conjunct in Regulus. Let's call on the benefic Regulus. I'm not doing Regulus as talisman right now because even though it is Sol Day, first of all, the moon is conjoining from the 12th. And secondly, it is so close to Mars, and with Regulus, I want to accent on the Jupiterian, on the solar qualities, on the benevolent open heart qualities. Although Mars is so well aspected, it is in Virgo. Yes, it's not yes, but it's the aspects to Mars are fine. Okay, it is in good aspect with the Sun, and the Sun is in Cancer. Um, but let's talk about this 29-degree midheaven with Uranus. Moon is squaring Uranus. Otherwise, I would make a Uranus anaretic degree talisman. For those of you who are daring, I totally would go for that. I'm a night chart, but for those day chart that are less sensitive to the moon transits, this is a great time to capture Venus in Taurus and Uranus. Um, in Taurus, if you have a different type of ascendant, okay, if the ascendant is still in Leo, I know, because the sun is in the 12th. Oh, damn. This is a challenging one, but those of you that do capture Venus, that would be fantastic. Um, I want to talk about Uranus transiting Chiron. And this is going to be relevant for both those of you who were born around around 1984, where you would have Chiron in the first degrees of Gemini. Some of you already have it right now. Okay, those who were born a little bit before me, and those that had it before may have a little eureka, because the Chiron Pisces are about to have a square, the Chiron Aries are about to have a sextile, and I'm about to have the conjunction. So I want to conjoin the meanings of Chiron and Uranus. Chiron takes around 50 years to surround the zodiac, Uranus around 84 years. Both could be considered intergenerational planets. Just for comparison, the traditional intergenerational planet Saturn takes only 28 years to surround the entire zodiac. So people would have multiple Saturn returns in their lives, some of them. Perhaps with the Uranus topic, I shouldn't have mentioned that. But we have, let's talk about the topic of unexpectedly alive after 27, unexpectedly alive after 26, unexpectedly alive after 54 or 58, for those who haven't completely finished the Saturn return. Sorry. um, um, yes, but I know it's the 00 Rahu 22nd degree. It's about to turn into the 21st degree. It's on the lot of fortune of whatever. Um, but the meanings of Chiron is that wound that takes 5 decades to purge. And when you're done with that, then if you're going to be a Centaurian, you're going to have another one. So there are, and this is both when I see around me, the aftermath of Chiron is definitely tremendous healing. Okay, people um, way more, it ranges from feeling safer in the body, having their own house, recovery, or beginning to live with, or being able to breathe again after post-traumatic stress, and so on, losing tremendous amount of weight, having a relationship that is outer worldly, kind of like curating relationship wounds, and at the same time, at the same breathing, perhaps. Um, it's noteworthy that age 50 is not the end of life. And it's also noteworthy that even after that curation, people still have things that begin to compound. And sometimes it's when you think you're done with that, You want to first wait for Chiron to completely leave the sign where it is transiting, if it is a 50 years transit. Okay, and I'm going to address Uranus in a second. So, for example, for the Chiron Aries, y'all folks are not done with your healing until Chiron ingresses at least into Taurus, and then you begin another 50-year cycle. So, for many of you, you've already had a tremendous curation, but because Chiron is 5 decades of it's not digging into the wound because you have to let it go, but as you let it go, it surfaces up, and it's kind of like the muck that comes from a scar, and the scar takes a while to close, even with the best of oils and the best of treatment and the best of care, because those things just begin to uprise. And it's true to any transit, outer planet transit on like Uranus on that Chiron are another extended period of time where, so for those of you with Chiron Aries, you're about to finish your Chiron return when Chiron ingresses into Taurus, but then Neptune is going to spend 15 years around your Chiron, and you're going to be delving into the mystery of how that wound was created. Because right now Chiron is with Aries, there's a lot of LGBTQ topics coming in. I have Chiron in Gemini, which has to do in the fourth house, which has to do with my upbringing, things that I don't know that have affected language acquisition, um, my housing, and yes, Gemini is also children, and it's also gender, and the many times I asked myself if being a man most of my life, and then when I tended to meet the woman, and I saw what women are going through, I was like, how can I even say what my gender is? Because I was never allowed to be a woman, and therefore could never be allowed to be a man before I'm allowed to be a woman, never be allowed to be a woman before I'm allowed to be a man. So both of those are working in me. And then I found out about ritual abuse, and the fact that ritual abuse was constructed about Satanism and Baphometian structures, which to think about, let's say, Lucifer and Baphomet, it's about, well, isn't it just juxtaposing? So juxtaposing black and white, so and so, but then good and evil. And the frequent, incessant juxtapositions of the good and evil cause trauma and shock that make people susceptible to mind control and basically nullify the enlightenment that Lucifer supposedly comes to bring, or that Baphomet supposedly come to bring. This is my experience. And then all the questions about my gender, my sexuality, my preferences, and the fact that they make gender affirming care a pink wash to something like genitalia mutilation rituals that were persistent in Islam and in Judaism, that didn't add to the equation. Okay, so, and at the same time, I'm not running away to traditional gender roles, because this is also not the answer as I see it. And the fact that those rituals were made around real estate, and the priesthood and the banking castes or systems or class systems are so integrated. But it's even the survivors that are the most enlightened say, oh, but these people, it's on them, they choose, they this, they that. Well, somebody that was brought from infanthood to those at 12 years old, ask a child something that big, that necessitate killing and committing to something where they are already ashamed to exist, and so on and so forth. There was never a choice there to begin with. At the same time, we have the right to defend ourselves from ritual abuse by all means necessary, and of course that affects our banking system and so on and so forth. So for those of you who are going through the Aries, which is banking, peanuts, real estate, weapon industry, war, art of war, identity, the military projects, but also the shamanistic, the military projects are derivation of shamanistic traditions, colonialism, okay, with Saturn, slavery. So it's kind of like, for most of you, you went through your 50s, and I've seen people going through their 50s, finding open dialogue after being a decade of being annihilated and abused by their own psychologist after they were opening a fund to treat childhood sexual abuse. This is a true story, okay, of somebody I had to run away from because they couldn't handle what was happening to me. At that time, and then start to do something other than tending to that agenda. People going through perhaps separations, but coming to their own housing. People making music that is beyond extraordinary. People, beginning to develop their own breathing techniques, okay, and so on and so forth. Now, with Chiron around 50, for many of you, because you begin to have an access to choice and you see how you weren't ready to deal with that before, and because it's in Aries, you're like, oh, some people just don't want to help themselves. This is I don't judge you because I understand there's a reason you folks are going through that. Many of you are Pluto Virgos, and you know, I love Virgos, but but you're so destructive to yourself. You think about, oh, Virgos, they're so judgmental. So no, you're getting the tip of the iceberg of how judgmental they are to themselves, and it's very easy to forget. And this is the ward sign, so. So it's like you just speak with a Virgo, and it's like you have no idea the depth of the ocean that's go through, how they can annihilate themselves sometimes, and so people feeling shamelessly exposed. But the thing is that I love Virgo. Virgo is my seventh house, um, and and the thing is that for many of you, it's like, oh, some people don't want to help themselves. You are perpetuating the wound of the Pluto Virgos. Okay, when you were taken, oh, you think you are sorry? Here, I'll take you to the other street. That person is sleeping. Ta 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 ta. Ta. Take them to the kingdom, darling. These people were raped in sinfulhood, and some of them now are Pluto. We have royalty Pluto Virgos, and but then it's kind of like you went through the understanding, like you begin to access a choice that perhaps is difficult, and you begin to heal yourself, and then all these things are coming to the forefront to also be cleansed. So it's different for different people, um, and accessing our identity and sexual identity, which is Chiron Aries, and Chiron Mercury is sextiling that. Um, Particularly all the sexual abuse that is associated with that. So it's kind of like doomed if you do, doomed if you don't, doomed if you're gay, doomed if you're straight, doomed if you are emotionally incompetent, and doomed if you, God forbid, cry or tend to your emotions. And those are, and doomed if you have a housing, and doomed if you don't have a housing. Um, and so or if you have a bank or if you don't have a bank, if you have the ability to participate in trade or if you don't. Um, and so that is the transit in Chiron. So it's not done till it's ingress to Taurus, and then it's going to do stuff in Taurus. I mean, but definitely Chiron at around 50. The Chiron return, I'm not yet 50, but I see people around me at that age, and what they go through is tremendous purgatory, tremendous healing. Um, and even though that healing might not be complete, it opens another cycle of going to 100, okay? And for many people, they didn't even think they would be going through 10. And I mean 10 years. So, and I'm one of them. So now let's talk about the meaning of what. Now that we talked about the meaning of Chiron, and the accessing the deep wound, that from the deep creational wound, now that I think about that, because it's done upon conception. It's our natal chart is upon conception, and Chiron is the wound. Um, and so upon conception, Chiron was touching there, and we tend to that conception, to our tending to our conception is tending to the curation of that wound intergenerationally for our years. For me, it's going to be extra important because I'm one of those Chirons that are in the fourth house. So Chiron in the eighth, Chiron in the fourth. Um, Chiron at signs Chiron in the 12th as well can give you that Chiron in the 5th. Okay, they are all conceptions, and even the 6th to some degree. But at any case, it's your natal chart. Okay, and when something crosses your natal chart, it crosses that part of conception. So it can be the original, let's say Mars, your original initiation, your original passion, your original spark of life. With Chiron is your original wound, and or the wound of origin. Um, so Uranus crossing Chiron. Uranus has to do with astrology, with revolution, with yes, I think when Uranus was crossing my ascendant, I discovered the healing power of astrology, um, and and Uranus is also about bombs, Kundalini rise, so it's orgasm, rape, shock, and suicide all together. Um, because Uranus is trauma and shock. And the way, for example, that they would use in the ritual abuse, they would rape children to make them susceptible to mind control. Uranus also rules the nervous system, and this is how people permeate the nervous system of another, which can lead to orgasmic, cosmic union that is willingly consensual and sensual and curating. And at the same time, it also is a road to that mind control, to astral rape, to rituals, to the second frontiers of rituals, of ritual abuse, um, to nervous system trauma, to being triggered, to neurodivergence, but also to astrology, to curation, to something that is not non-linear, to the silly walk. Some people consider it the higher octave of Mercury, to sudden liberating change, um, and to radical acceptance. When it comes to Uranus, radical acceptance is required at every turn. To community and idealism, as well as tyranny and the removal of tyranny. Okay, it's a very, very complex planetary association. When Uranus goes through a sign, it sparks. You want to think about Uranus going through a sign. Let's say you want to fix an old library. So the way Uranus would do that is to take all of the books from all of the shelves and then create a big giant mess of all of the books of all of the shelves with the dust, with everything, and then begin to pop this up. Hey, what's that? That book. Oh, let's put it next to that book. What is that? Mein Kampf and Psalm. Okay, let's read one from Mein Kampf, one from Psalm. Oh, that seems to work. Okay, and you think about it. Oh, it's Baphometian. Well, I don't know if that would be the correct term, but the chaos, the order out of chaos is an initiation type of a ritual. At the same time, with the hard aspects to Uranus, we will see ritual abuse rather than the deliberating perspective. And so when Uranus crosses a certain sign, it's doing just that. For example, Uranus to 2018, okay, Uranus ingressed into Taurus. So ladies began to channel their vagina, and then it's like, what about people with penis? Oh, can you try to channel your penis? And then Uranus is also what happens when you channel. So it's like, oh, why is there the government there? What's the government doing there? I was supposed to reconnect with my own sensuality. Oh, let's try self pleasure. Self pleasure may, okay, it's Sun in Taurus, and you like, why am I trying? I'm trying to self pleasure, but I'm not alone. What is happening? Sometimes it's pleasant, sometimes it's not. When it's not, we call it ritual abuse. So okay, when it's when you think about that, we call when we like something, we call it one name. Okay, we say, oh, this is channeling, this is Eureka, this is the cosmos. When we don't like it, ah, these social engineers again. And it was going through demonstrations. So there were people throwing tomatoes at museum pieces. So because Venus Uranus rules art, but also revolution, and also farming, and it went through guerrilla gardening. And digging half moons and the holistic meaning of half moons and eurekas about the soil, but also discovering that there were very likely bodies in the backyard that they didn't want me to suddenly accidentally dig up. It is the astrology of, okay, it says, it is, oh, my voice is changing, my mannerism is changing, my this, my that. In the meantime, there is AI that's supposed to authenticate your voice and imitate that. It's very difficult to imitate a person who's constantly changing their voice. Okay, and very challenging to authenticate that. But with Uranus, the only constant is change. So you think about, oh, gender affirming care is so important, and so this is so that. Well, isn't that just like the rituals that the Islamic and the Jews did, and it's forced, and the mother goes through trauma, and the child goes through trauma, and it's irreversible, and it's this and it's that. And why does my gender identity have to go through the pharmaceuticals again? Like, not only enough that to have housing or to have funding for studies, I had to declare myself total cuckoo. And then I see, well, if I declare myself total cuckoo, let's see what they have to give to total cuckoos. Well, it's making a person want to kill themselves, where actually the only reason I came there was that I was like, give me death or give me studies. And the only way to get studies rather than death was to agree to something that is like death. And so think about gender affirming care in that regard, because Uranus rules technology. The voices of the people, there was the topic of, is sex work is work, and da 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 da. I was like, yeah, but when all work becomes like sex work, we discover that sex work is not work. And Uranus Gemini is going to touch on that quite significantly. Like, sex work is work, but wouldn't you, but isn't that something that you do to get out of that situation? When you got out of that situation, you don't ever want to go back. It's like, oh, isn't that like waitressing? Well, let's dig into the problem. What is the problem with waitressing? Oh, the sexual harassment that's coming from the clients, and the fact you have to stand on your feet more than you're supposed to, and the fact that you don't have. Oh, that's slavery. Slavery. Yes, this is also a problem with sex work, because it was never you artistically expressing your sexuality, but actually being enslaved to somebody else's desire without taking yours into accountability. And not having something that is balancing or remediating, or that is done in a way, basically that was slavery. So your problem was to begin with slavery, and Uranus in Gemini is going to tend to that. Um, and so for many of you that had, let's say, Chiron in Taurus, only now you're about to have the final eurekas regarding healing your own Chiron. Okay, thinking about the Inuit and Sedna, with the generation of Sedna in Taurus still. Right now, Sedna is in Gemini, but most of you have the generation of Sedna in Taurus, and think about the throat singing of the Inuit, but also the prevalence of childhood sexual abuse among the same community that permeates our entire society, because our even most elite traditions are based on Inuit rituals and traditions. Okay, and so and yet they are situated in northern Greenland, where this is the northern Arctic and northern Greenland, and this is where the only place where Russia is not to the northeast. So everybody needs to tend to Inuit. But for many of you, um, so for some people that are Inuit, coming back to the tradition and the throat singing and so on was curating of depression and curating of many, and the curating power of the voice. And then at the same time, there is also, hey, that curation was coming or stemming from something that was very prevalent, that perhaps need to be tended to in the indigenous tradition itself, and perhaps that was a wound that brought colonialism as well, because the colonizers were doing rituals in seclusion and the shamans perhaps can validate that, that were analogous to the rituals that are done on shamans in indigenous society, and particularly those societies that are the most essential to national and international security. We can understand people were fighting over this land very likely before the Inuit. Um, and there's a reason that the Inuit took the fight, but the Inuit are closest to their practices to the elite. And this is something that perhaps is dumbfounding, um, but is also how the Chiron Taurus, that's to do with the voice and the expression and relationships and having a win-win in life and having connections in life, how that is addressed by Uranus crossing over your Chiron and making a revolution there. And now it's the turn um, of the Chiron Geminis. For the Chiron Aries, Uranus crossing over your Chiron it has been a while ago. Okay, that would be until 2018. Um, so 2011, around 2010, 2011, Uranus ingressed into Aries, and that was the wound about entrepreneurship, self-identity, sexual identity was sparked up. This was also the age where we had the first gay marriage. Um, and for the Chiron return, some of you even divorced. So a lot of the people that were fighting for gay marriage divorced, because that is the nature of Uranus, is that which is liberating society from a certain boundary. And then divorce is another form of liberation, because the needed liberation was not only about being able to be happily married and acknowledged and accepted into society, but also to say no, not just to say yes, but also to say no. And that is how Uranus was finding itself. For some of you, it happened during Uranus in Taurus, but how that was finding itself from the what I want Aries to hey I and what I don't want, to also being able to separate and to withdraw consent, and that was Uranus in Venus sign. Now Uranus going over Chiron in Gemini. I'm about to begin this transit. I think it's already very visible what it is about. Um, and when I hear about people Uranus crossing their Chiron, dealing it's highly unlikely, unless Uranus is very well aspected, is sextiling Chiron and Saturn now. But unless Uranus is very well aspected, um, it's encountering that which requires 5 decades to heal. And for most of us, we are not 50 yet. All of us, we're not 50 yet. I'm Chiron 1 degree Gemini. We're not 50 yet. And yet we are asked to curate something as if we were 70. This is the transit of Uranus anywhere. Okay. Uranus meeting the sun, it's like, hey, you want to kill yourself or you want to be yourself. Okay, and for those of us that have had Uranus crossing their sun, they've literally asked the question: do you want to kill yourself or you want to be yourself? And and for us, it's tending to society, because Uranus is a societal wound. Because the answer is, of course, I want to be myself, but then you are yourself, and then you see how society, Uranus, is not yet ready for people to be themselves. And so the wound around Gemini is concerning language and language acquisition, childhood, which tells me a telltale that for many people, it's about sexuality as well. Um, and a sexual boundary violation. I've addressed people that are curating from being pedophiles, something that you couldn't even mention a decade ago. But those people that are curating from satanic ritual abuse and war in the rituals, they are curating not only for being the victims of pedophilia, but also pedophiles. Um, and they're doing that. So that's very possible. And so and the understanding that the fact that they need to do that is the fact that pedophilia is actually harming people and harming children intensely. so much that they spend 5 decades trying to curate for something that they don't even know what it is, and has to do with that. Um, uh, Gemini rules things that come into contracts, technology as well. Um, Things that are of dual nature, trade as well, so trade, children, trade and children. And you want to think about the fact that children, for most of us, we're opening our 40s when that, okay, end of 30s, opening our 40s. Um, and you think about that as children, okay? So it's both the fact that what a child would do when they are hurt, and the fact that who they do this to is a child, even when that child is supposedly 40. Um, and then it brings back what a child would do, and they do it to a child, and what a child would do, and so on, because a 40 years old child has different skills and different knowledges and different tools and different things. And when they use that as that child that was hurt, but if that child was hurt from pedophilia and they try to traffic that child, so that child would use everything that that child has to avoid that. If that is nuclear holocaust, so be it. And this is the question Uranus always asks: do you want to be yourself, or do you want to kill yourself? But this is the generation, because Gemini itself is a societal sign. So this is the generation where people stop commemorating their dead loved ones that had to kill themselves because of society, and start to say, well, what if society dies? Then we will change. And this happens in context with Neptune and in context with Pluto, that talks about genocide, democide, colonialism, yes, but also social revolution. How many people died for women to have the right to vote, for children to have child rights, that there will not be in child labor? Where are children in child labor? Well, aren't those places where their traditions are supportive in their rituals before colonialism, something that the child is born into debt to the parents? And so Uranus going over Chiron is looking at the very wound that takes 5 decades to even begin to purge, and looking at it from every single periscope and perspective. Now, what we're going to see, because it's a verbal sign, Uranus liberates the speech. When Uranus was going over my Mercury with Aries, that was a time where I had um, where going from not being able to speak about my trauma to uncontrollable speech, which is a part of recovery, and it's not something that came in a closed circuit, because it had to be societal. And I thought that I'm going to die. I didn't see not that the Me Too is anywhere close to what it needed to be, but 2019 was the first wave of talking about satanic ritual abuse, and I wasn't even there. I was at the Who Would Believe Me when I went through satanic ritual abuse from a person that went himself through satanic ritual abuse, and I met it through the vicinity of a person that I met as a psychologist. Um, but he was ritually abused. Okay, so that is, he was getting something that looked like electric shocks in the room in front of me when I am the patient. So basically, I am his testimony. And I know that that had to do with the military projects, and it's how they're trained and so on. And I would, see things and so on. And so would they. And yes, after that, you cannot. The shock is so tremendous that, and then people try to withdraw and that was at the core at the core of decentralizing the relationships between patients and the medical system, when I was myself learning to be aromatherapist. Okay, and doing astrology supposedly on the side, but you see that came with me, the astrology, and Uranus going over Chiron. We are both the instigator, but we're also going through something where our original conception wound is being um, looked at or transitioned by a planet that tends to make a giant mess everywhere it goes. And this is a wound that takes 5 decades to purge, being going through that transition before. And for many of you, it happened, with the both for the Chiron Taurus and the Chiron Aries and the Chiron Pisces. I think, yes, the guy, you guys weren't even 50 yet, my God. Uh, is that true, right? Yeah. Um, and so, um, and so Uranus examines that, and it's not examining that, it's just cruising through, and this is like the sore point of our chart, and something cruising through that in fits of rage, in excitement, in thinking one day like this, one day like that. Okay, just like that, you think about this alien throwing all the Akashic library of everybody, takes a book in. Oh, what's that? Oh, that's that. Oh, that's when Genghis Khan came, or that was when Jesus came. Oh my God, it looks exactly the same. Yes, two people, they take over the world, they torture everyone, they kill everyone, and then you have to be like them. Okay, this is Gemini. So, so somebody would look at your own conception wound, um, and try to and have all these connections that don't seem to connect, but they connect that, and you try to explain to them what's the difference, and you try to explain to them why is that connected, was like what, or sometimes Saturn disconnects things that are very connected, or like what's the connection between LGBTQ and being killed for not having real estate? Like, you have to be gay, you had to be gay in those sororities, for that, like you had to rape a child, and somebody had to rape you, and you had to have a penis to have a real estate, to have access to but the bank was funding that. So so that's also Uranus. And this is the spirit in which Uranus goes through Chiron. Uranus doesn't understand, because it's like an alien that you try to explain your humanly troubles to. Okay, if you think about when I did, when Pluto and the Sun were going over Capricorn, and the end of Capricorn, and I thought about how would I explain sexual abuse to an alien, and I did an exercise about it. I was like, they don't even get what I'm talking about. And you think about your deepest, darkest wounds, and somebody else is like coming from a different world. Is like, what do you mean? What's that? And this is Uranus going through every planet, but also and particularly Uranus going through Chiron, because Chiron is your original wound, and with Gemini, it has to do with children, trade, language, contracts, lawyers. Um, and the fact that we forget, it happens in sextile to Neptune, and thank God, or thank anti-God, I don't know, but the thing is that a lot of people, Uranus is the shock, Neptune is the dissociation, and many people, I was just thinking about, with people exposing the Peter rings and so on, bringing pictures from 96, pictures from this, pictures from that. It was like some of these people very likely are even dissociated from the fact that they were there. They see the pictures, like maybe they see the pictures like it was the first time they see that picture, and and that opens a can of worms even to the person that was the perpetrator or that was there, and they themselves, sometimes they do remember, sometimes they don't remember, sometimes that's the nature of these things that happen there. They usually happen where people are really drugged up, um, and and for many people it's going to be like, well, that's a first, and some of them can naturally ask, is that AI? And that's not only evading accountability or whatnot, but it's like, no, there's genuine dissociation that come with those rituals, because they are both the victims and perpetrators. And sometimes the child in the scenario how to kills the politician, or okay. And so this is Uranus going through the original wound, and this is a wound that takes 5 decades to even begin to assess, and you're not even 50 yet, and then Uranus comes in and sparks that chord. Um, Unless there are some of you who are 100 years old, I think about the fact that, the Holocaust, the second Holocaust, or the people that were surviving the Holocaust died in 7th of October, and um, and the Facebook was gushing with the first day, the first shock of that. Facebook was gushing with before Israel responded, so to sagen, real estate speaking about, but and it's not Israel's real estate, by the way. So it's like, no, it's okay, no, 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 it's not Israel doing the occupation, but whatever. Um, Pay attention to the truth and when there is a truth. So, and when is the truth respected, which didn't happen with Ukraine, by the way. People in Odessa. Um, yes, just go on YouTube. So yeah, what? It's Saturn hour. Of course, it's Saturn hour. Of course, it's Saturn hour. But I began that with the Moon hour. You be my testimony. Um, I'll post that on a Jupiter hour. Um, so yeah, you think about the fact that Uranus going through anything is Uranus doing just that. But when it's going through the original wound, it's kind of like you're not even 50 yet. You haven't even begun to process that, and now there's the planet of shock and trauma, but also accidental recovery and liberation, going through the original of wounds. And you know what? It's meeting Sedna. So to accentuate on that a fraction of a bit more, um, yes, it's meeting Sedna as well, which I addressed in previous videos. I'm already tired of talking of talking about Sedna. It's like I'm already exhausted of the wounds that Sedna addresses. And how Uranus comes in, and it's already conjuncting Sedna, and it's already conjuncting the 0 and 1 degree chirons. So we're already in that transition. And we are very likely a shock to society as well during this time. But it sextiles the Chiron, the end of Chiron Pisces. Oh, thanks God. um, and yes, it is thanks God, because the end of Chiron Pisces are not done with their Saturn return, some of them. So there will be by 2026, but it sextiles Chiron Pisces, where for some of you, we are the ones that talk about what you even didn't think to conceptualize, especially since you had to, most of you are the Pluto Virgo, so you had to like make your words, the power of the word, and making your word heard and accepted, and so on and so forth. So there was no time for that Chiron wound, and now the other Mercury sign is kind of like you know like the elephant in a glass shop. Okay, an entire generation of Pluto Virgos. Thank you for saying that yourself. But this is our job right now, is to be that elephant in a glass shop, um, because certain glass needs to be broken, like the glass ceilings of our recovery from ritual abuse. Um, and the glass ceiling of where you either are a ritual abuse survivor, and God forbid you sing, God forbid you create, God forbid you make money, um, God forbid you have a house, or um yes, but also where the places where people need to be liberated from doing this organized crime wound, because Chiron Pisces is the organized crime wound. With the Uranus Gemini, they're going to have a lot of chances to recover, because there are going to be new type of business making that is called for by many people. So many more people will be able to work where previously they couldn't. At the same time, we have AI. So people say, "Oh, it's a loss of jobs." Well, it's only a loss of jobs to those who had a job. And if you were insisting on not being enslaved to satanic system, then you didn't have a job, and now you just might. Um, and so, for the beginning, Chiron Aries, the wound around identity. It's kind of like, oh, finally I can say I'm gay, I am straight, I am this, I am that. And then, comes Uranus in Gemini. It's like, wait a second. Were you MK Ultra? Were you ritually abused? Were you partaking in ritual abuse? Is what you're making money from is free from ritual abuse? Or because there's so many things that are going to change. If I think about the '96 internet revolution and the fact that we began to download something that, like, some of us could never access a concert to begin with, or not even conceptualizing that they could buy a ticket and see a concert, or it was too dangerous or too risky. I was growing as a young teenager with buses exploding, so the first time I took a bus looked like a Mr. Bean satire. I took it to the wrong direction, and I sit in the bus, and the bus is looking at me, and I'm looking at him, and it's like, well, it's the last station. And the first time I went to a pub, it was not one but two previous bombings, and I was late to my own party, so the people already called a table. That was the table that exploded. That was the Mike's place in Tel Aviv. Um, so what is going to pubs and going to parties and going to concerts? Like, who would even think about that? It's not just the money, but who would even think about that? And then we began to download music. And the same time, I began to buy records at the same time that I began to download music, because I began to appreciate music, and I was like, oh, I want the record of that. Um, Usually it was on MTV, and who would think to ask for from your parents, or your single parent, a ticket to buy, a record, um, like, especially if you don't work, right? And it's like, well, I make the money, then I'll buy it. But then I try to make the money with entrepreneurship, and they want me to come up with patents like making the toothpasta with double the whole of the toothpasta, so they will have double the income. And now I have a facial mask with xylitol and all kinds of radium stuff on that I'm supposed to put on my face. This is a company that does aromatherapy products. So this is probably why I didn't manage to grow my aromatherapy business, because I would have to put xylitol in, or I would have to put fluoride in, or I'll have to put another radium type of something residue here, and then sell it. And I'm like, no, no, thank you, no. Um, so for some of you Aries, it's about the wound of trade, the wound of identity, the wound of sexual identity, and how it all coincides. I believe you noticed the dissociation there. I don't. I was completely dissociated. Okay, so geen herinnering aan. Which reminds me that the fourth house is also in my motherland and my fatherland, and that is Netherlands. And Dutch was the language that was more than English close to me, but to speak Dutch was difficult for me. And the more I tended to that, the more I realized the ritual satanic abuse to do with the real estate, because they wanted to traffic me. A completely Dutch makler wanted, a real estate realtor wanted to traffic me. It was waiting for my mother to sell me to him so that we would have apartment in Nijmegen, I think it was, and then we didn't have a house in Netherlands, and you had to register, so you had yes, and so on and so forth, and even the fact that my parents needed another parent to conceive, now that it's probably going to leak, that's the freedom of people stealing your stuff and childhood pictures, that it's like it's gonna leak anyway, and this is very likely because the family of the father was associated with the church, which is very likely Mason, and very likely that causes, what the rituals that they do cause sperm depletion. Um, and my mother was insistent on having child with natural conception, which, by the way, as childhood I judged, but looking back, I was like, that was the best decision to do, because that conception was important, because it was socially engineered for women to not be able to give natural birth at the time. Good morning. This is Uranus going over Chiron in Gemini. Geminis have no filter, and Uranus is liberating them from the little filter that they have. So now you know the story of my conception.